Let me read a few verses of Judges chapter 20. The word of God says, Then all the children of Israel went out, and the congregation was gathered together as one man, from Dan even to Beersheba, with the land of Gilead, unto the Lord in Mizpah. And the chief of all the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 footmen, and they drew sword. Now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel were gone up to Mizpah. Then said the children of Israel, Tell us, how was this wickedness? And the Levite, the husband of the woman who was slain, answered and said, I have come to Gibeah that belongeth to Benjamin, I and my concubine, to lodge. And the men of Gibeah arose against me, and beset the house round about me by night, and thought to have slain me, and my concubine have they forced, that she is dead. And I took my concubine, and cut her in pieces, and sent her all through the country of the inheritance of Israel, for they have committed lewdness and folly in Israel. Behold, ye are all children of Israel. Give here your advice and counsel. And all the people arose as one man, saying, We will not any of us go to his tent, neither will any of us turn into his house. But now this shall the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will up by lot against it. The events of chapter 19 got people attention. It was such atrocity. It was such lewdness as never was seen throughout Israel. These events happened shortly after the Joshua had took them into the promised land. So there was still a strong sense of unity among the tribes of Israel. It's no wonder why they were able to assemble themselves from Dan to Beersheba, that is, from the farthest north to the deepest south. The gathering took place at Mizpah, which was on the border of the territory of the tribe of Dan, of Benjamin. And therefore, it was very near where these events happened. Interestingly, it would have been the fact that the tribal leaders were there and over 4,000 footmen with their swords. And not only that, the verse 1 of chapter 20 said, they gathered unto the Lord. One may be tempted to think that this is a somewhat spiritual overtone. But of course, it was only another facade. Because grief has a way, and atrocities have a way of bringing people together, even enemies. There is something about a despicable act that unites people in condemning. There is something about lewdness and atrocities that brings people together in condemnation. It doesn't mean that people are necessarily spiritual, but what it simply means is that there is something about adversity that causes us to come together. So the Levite of chapter 19 was invited to speak. After all, he was, should I say, the survivor. And interestingly, the Bible called him for the very first time, the husband of the woman that was slain in 20 Judges chapter 20 and verse 4. He was called the husband of the woman that was slain. So at least he is now, the writer is acknowledging that this was a woman who ought to have been very dear to him. She is not just a concubine. She is a wife. And interestingly, the Levite was as he put his case before the entire gathering of Israel, he was very dramatic. And if you note his recollection, Judges chapter 20, verse 5, he said, the men of Gibeah rose against him. Very dramatic. And surrounded the house against him by night. They wanted to kill him. So he is now the victim. Of course, he's playing here on the emotions of the people who are gathered, selectively editing the account. They didn't want to kill him. They wanted him to come out like the men of Sodom so that they can commit acts of immorality with him. That's what they wanted to do. They didn't want to kill him. But here he is editing the truth. And in fact, he, in recalling the story, he never said that he pushed his concubine out. In fact, as he told the story, he said, my concubine have they forced that she is dead. So he's given the impression that he had nothing to do in her demise. They came after him. They wanted to kill him. They took his concubine. And so he was only the victim. And he said, I took my concubine and cut her in pieces. He did not speak of the disgraceful way in which she died because he pushed her out of the door to protect himself. He failed to give them the details of the inhuman way he acted the next morning when he found his concubine lying on the doorsteps. He made it appear to look as if he was the most virtuous one as possible. And I found that people have a way of twisting the truth in their favor. You see, no one was there, and that woman was not there to defend herself. The old man was not there to say what has happened. But the Levite, you think the so-called priest, would be a friend of the truth. But the best of us, we have a way of choreographing and editing and cutting and paste the truth so that we make ourselves look good. And that's why it's so very important that you never take story or the story, or you never take the full picture from one side. Because in the best of us, we always try to look good in the recalling and the recounting of events. The Levite here, he wanted to appear as the victim. He wanted to appear as the one who injustice and lewdness was committed against. He did not even for once recognize the part he played in causing his concubine to receive such atrocity. But she was not there to defend herself. And every story has two sides. Never run with a story from one side. The Levite recollection of the story was compelling, and it came across as in fact he asked people. He said give advice and come. In other words, tell me, what should I have done? Because sometimes you listen to people tell their story and you would think they are so compelling, so convincing, that you would think that is the truth. But there's always another side. There's always another side. And I think this story, as I read these few verses this morning, it dawned on me that we should not even think that because people are religious that they are telling the full truth. Even church people lies. And when I say church people, I mean even Seventh-day Adventists, we could lie very good in the name of God. And in fact, you would be amazed that the people gathered before the Lord. So here the Levite is before God at Mizpah, and he's still lying. So don't be surprised that people lie even in church before the Lord. And it tells us that there are some people who they have just no regard for where they are. Their whole impression is to make themselves look good and to avert any sign of repercussion on themselves, or any anything that would cause them to look bad, anything that would cause them to have a bad name. They would do everything to save their honor. And here this morning we see the Levite is trying to save his honor. He's trying to play on the collective grief of the people, but he was not telling the full truth. Because had he told the full truth, he would have told them that the men really wanted him, not his concubine. That he decided to sacrifice his wife, his concubine, so he could save his life. And that he treated her with such disdain. He would have told them the full truth. And maybe they might have killed him. He may have lost his life. So he edited the truth. I want to say this morning, sometimes the truth is hard to tell, but we must speak the truth, cost it what it may. Because there is still a commandment in the Bible that prohibits lying. And liars will not enter the kingdom in the same way as idolaters and homosexuals and thieves and liars and adulterers, liars. And I think the Bible condemns lying as any other sin. It is not any less of a sin. It's just as horrible to tell a lie as it is to thief and to commit a crime. Of course, the repercussions may not be as devastating, but in the eyes of God, a sin is a sin. And so what the Levite is doing here in editing the truth, selectively editing the truth, he's actually just as diabolic as the men who abuse his wife. And we ought to condemn liars and lying in the same way we condemn every sin. There is no big sin and little sin. Of course, admittedly, I must add that some sins have greater consequences, and I do agree. And some sin has a heavier weight of accountability. But in the eyes of God, once a sin is committed, it's a sin. And here, the Levite is showing that he is just as callous in his thinking as the men who abused it. He was willing to tell selective truth without giving the full truth. This morning, we have to be willing to speak the truth, cost it what it may. And God's people must be people of truth. It is not always easy to tell the truth, but we got to speak the truth. If something is wrong, it's wrong. And sometimes speaking the truth may bring us harsh consequences. But it's the truth. And it may mean that we end up in trouble. But it's the truth. God expects us to be people of truth who speak the truth. And when the truth is not spoken, it should equally be condemned as any other sin that is committed. I want to challenge us this morning. God is watching us. Let's start speaking. Let's be people of truth. If something is wrong, it's wrong. If something doesn't belong to you, don't say it belong to you. These are some basic things as Christians that we ought to cultivate. And in Judges chapter 20, we see here how easy it is to twist the truth to protect ourselves. May God help us this morning that we will speak the truth and teach our children to speak the truth. You know, I I had as I'm speaking this morning, we were talking, myself and my wife, we were talking with our little girl um, a couple of days ago, and I can't remember. Somebody gave her something. I'm trying to recall what it was. But anyway, she told us, she said to us, she told them she didn't like. Um, no, they asked her how she enjoyed what she gave them, what they gave her. And she told them that she didn't like it. She didn't, it was not nice. It wasn't nice. She said it didn't taste good. And when we were speaking with her, we we said to her, but you should be sensitive to people's feelings. Um, because if someone give you something, um, and they ask you, how is it? Don't tell them that you didn't like it. And then she said to us, she said, but if I didn't tell them that, I will be telling a lie. I'll be lying. And I myself and my wife looked at each other and we said, but she's talking, but she's correct. But we said, still try to be sensitive to people's feelings. That hit us because she said, but if I did not tell her what, that I did not like it, I will be lying. And it hit me at that moment how easy it is sometimes we try to make ourselves look good and others look good by not telling them exactly the truth. But then I was explaining to her there is something called social mediation. You can tell someone the truth without necessarily making them feel bad. But folks, we need to speak the truth. And truth is something that we have to inculcate in our lives, to speak and teach it to our children, that they too must speak the truth, cost it what it may. May God help us this morning. That we'll be people of the truth, not just having the truth, but also speaking the truth. God expects us to do it. Amen.